SIG Forum. For those of you who don't know, ICLE stands for Intercultural Communication and Language Education. So welcome everyone. And today, as Naomi announced already, we have two presenters. Val is our program chair and Eric is an invited speaker today. And for the chosen topic today, Val will try to show the relationship between communities and intercultural communication using insights from the Communities of Practice framework. And Eric will be talking about intercultural projects, specifically Ivy project, which is a wonderful project. I used it for a couple of years in my classes, so I hope everybody will enjoy their presentations. So I'm going to ask first Val to take the floor, and we'll have a Q&A session after each presentation, just to give people more time for discussion. All right, so Val, here you go.
Thanks, Roxana. Yes, my name is Val Hansford, and I teach at Soka University in Tokyo, where I teach both undergraduate and graduate students. Today, I'm going to be talking about the connection between intercultural communication and communities, and what is it with the connection to communities of practice. And my idea for this came from at the end of last year's JALT. I heard so many people talking about that year's theme was teachers, efficacy, learner agency. And even at the end of this conference, so many people were saying, okay, I still don't understand what the theme was. So I thought, well, this time I want to try and understand this. It seems very simple on the surface, the communities of teachers and learners. But I wanted to see how does that connect with intercultural communication, because for me, there's a very clear connection, but how could I explain it? Especially because in the introduction for the theme, they mention specifically Wenger's, I think that's the pronunciation. If anyone knows different, please let me know. And his communities of practice. So I thought, well, trying to find the connections and get some insights in order to what we can do in our classes. So I'm briefly going to talk about what I see as the core issue or the core purpose of intercultural communication. And then I will go over a few definitions and my understanding of them, leading into the question of what is communities of practice, what I learned from my research into communities of practice, and then I will share a few insights that I gained from doing the research and make a recommendation. And then afterward, I'll open up for Q&A. Okay, so for me, the real core of intercultural communication or communication in general is whether it's between two or more people, is one person has an intention, what they want to share. They have to convert it into speech or writing or some other form of communication that the other person then takes in. But there's sometimes a bit of a gap between what the intention is and what is actually understood. So how to bridge this gap is what we always do whenever we're communicating with someone. And so how does this connect with intercultural communication? Well, I look to the linguocultural approach. And now the picture is hard to imagine because it's kind of supposed to be 3D in a way. So where it says between understanding, this is supposed to represent two people. And each person has both a personal self, what makes them unique and special, and a cultural self, which is what makes them typical of the culture to which they belong or the cultures to which they belong. So everybody is a combination of these two things, and even people from within the same cultural group may have misunderstandings. I'm sure many of you have had misunderstandings with friends and family members. And so, part of this understanding of each other, to gain an awareness of what it is to be whether personal, cultural, or intercultural understanding, is being aware that there's a gap between what you're intending to convey and what the other person understands. So for me, that's the awareness idea. And so when I connect that to intercultural competence, the competence part to me is the ability to function effectively across cultures, whether it's within the same cultural group or between different culture groups, people with different backgrounds. The ability to think and act appropriately in a cultural situation or any situation, and to communicate and work with people from different cultural backgrounds. Okay, so for me, that was the intercultural communication part. But okay, I'm throwing the word culture around. So what do I mean by culture? Well, for me, there's a lot of different definitions, and I found this was the simplest one to portray for this presentation. Oh, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Okay. And so this was the simplest one to convey one aspect of culture, is the 5 dimensions of culture. The idea that culture has, a culture has specific products that are used in it, practices, the way people do things within the culture, the actual people who are part of the culture, the way things like products and practices and symbols can be interpreted, or the view, the perspective on it can be affected by the culture that they belong to. And the 5th one, that is the one that helped me connect to this theme, is culture is also part of, there's multiple communities within one cultural group. So everybody belongs to multiple communities. And you're probably very used to adjusting, as for example, I have a number of different communities I belong to, and I know instinctively how to interact within that community that I may not do in another community. When I work with, in the university situation, how I interact with people is very different than the way I interact with my family. And I don't consciously think about these differences, but my moving between these communities all adds to what makes my culture. Okay, so so building on that kind of idea, we often talk in culture of the cultural iceberg. So this is kind of connecting the two. The cultural iceberg is where things that are above the surface are visible. It's very explicit. We can say, this is culture. This is a product of this culture. But how it's interpreted or how it's used, that's sort of invisible or tacit. It's below the surface, and we're not always conscious of it. So these pieces together make the culture, for me. Okay, so, but I wanted to look more specifically at what is the community and how does this impact? Well, again, I was struggling with the definition of this, but what I did was I went, to keep it simple, I went to an online dictionary, Cambridge Dictionary online, and this was what I found. It was, community is people living in one particular area, or people who are considered as a unit because of their common interests, social group, or nationality. And so, you know, it's like everyone can sort of see, yeah, okay, I belong to this community. This is my neighborhood. In my case, I'm from Canada, so that's my nationality. We have a common interest, obviously, because people have joined this session, a common interest in intercultural communication, in language education. So we've got we could be considered a community. It's a short-lived community, but it's a community. So how does this connect with the idea of communities of practice? So what is a community of practice? And so this is where this is the research, and this is my understanding of it. When I was looking at it and this is what was listed on the website for JALT, that community of practice requires, has 3 specific characteristics that all 3 together combine to make a community of practice. So those 3 characteristics are shared domain of interest, which is you either come together purposefully or incidentally, but the shared domain of interest means that if you're a member of this community and this community of practice, you need to be committed to the sharing of interests, the sharing of the knowledge and abilities within that group. And so specifically what this means is it's not just a, where I lost my point here. Okay, it's not just a club where we get together and, oh, I like playing this game, so we're a community. Well, that's not a community of practice per se on its own. Or networking. Many of us network usually when we're in face-to-face in person. When we're face-to-face in person, at JALT, I know I tend to do a lot of networking. I talk with people that I don't see all the time, and hey, how's it going? Great, we're networking. And then perhaps in the future, we might meet up at another situation. That is very short term. Yes, we have repeated, but it's not necessarily a community of practice, just on that area. So you may never know somebody is part of the same network too. You maybe never come in contact with them, but they're part of the same network. So that doesn't mean it's a community of practice. Another element that's important is the idea of, well, community itself. But in this case, community is defined here as being able to engage in joint activities and discussion in order to help each other and share information. That may sound just like, hey, it's a website, we put things together. But in actual case, this community also requires the building relationships. So building the relationship can take time. It doesn't happen right away. Like, you can talk to somebody on an airplane and have a really interesting discussion, but you're not really a community, because after the plane lands, you take off and leave and you never see that person again. Okay. And then the third criteria is the idea of shared practice. So people who are working together in this sort of shared practice, they start to pool their resources. They share their experiences and stories and basically tools and how to deal with problems, for example. But that doesn't happen right away. This requires time to develop these practices that everybody does together, and you have to continue interacting in order to develop this. And so a key example of this shared practice in my research that I discovered was the idea of nurses meeting for lunch in a hospital cafeteria. They maybe work on different wards or different floors, but they maybe get together every day for lunch, and through their discussion and sharing of what's going on, they over time create this pool of knowledge that they're sharing for how to care for their patients. And if they have particular recurring problems, they might have suggestions for how to solve them, even though they're not working in the same area. And one person might be working, I don't know, in emergency, where another person is working in the as reception for a doctor's practice kind of thing. So, but they can still share their practice, and over time they develop this pool of knowledge. And so as I was reading this, I made my own connections to some of my own groups that I belong to. For example, the English teachers that I work with in my faculty, we used to just sort of, if we had a problem, we'd go and find someone, ask questions. Occasionally, not occasionally, at the end of every semester, we would have a meeting to share ideas. But since we've actually gone online since April for our classes, we couldn't just run into each other in the hallways. So we started meeting weekly, and this has actually changed how we operate. And I think it also has improved our teaching and working with our students, because we've started getting to know each other better than we ever did passing in the hallway. But we also have started we actually continued meeting through the summer, because we found it was important to just connect and check in. And in fact, we've started doing game nights after our meetings. So that was very different than just the community of meeting in the hallway. It also helped me connect with another one that I belong to. Is at my university, we have a female faculty leadership salon. And that was, we only meet once a semester, but over time, because we've been doing this for a while, we've started to create a pool of knowledge. And we sort of, if we have problems or issues, we know people in other faculties now that we can connect with, who are experiencing some of the same challenges we have as female faculty, for example. So my understanding of this, I found this interesting, oops, where are we here? Visual of how all of this operates together. And so my understanding of how this visual worked is, this is a community of practice, where at the top, groups of people have come together spontaneously with this joint purpose that's labeled here, which I think corresponds with the shared domain. Okay, and so through this shared purpose, they build trust over time. They get to know each other, and this is the building of community. And then in order to, once they start to feel comfortable and trust each other, they can start sharing some of that knowledge that they don't usually talk about, that it's beneath the surface, but it comes out through their discussion. So they start sharing this and working together to develop a shared practice on how to deal with some of these issues, which creates a collective intelligence, which becomes, each person individually takes in their own knowledge as an individual, and they adapt it outside, and then they bring it back to the group. And I think it continues and becomes a stronger and stronger community of practice. That was my understanding with this visual. And so something else I discovered from this is sort of assuming that everybody is very actively involved. But something I discovered with this, that from Wenger and Trainer, they talked about the idea of, well, not everybody can be actively involved, so there's different levels of participation. We may have at the very center, the core, the leaders of the group, the ones who are very active, involved in maintaining this community of practice. And then there's not just the core, but the more active members who are involved. And as we progress outward, the occasional people who come in when they can, but they're busy, but they may join in to help out for different events. And I think as we go through, these people are still part of the community of practice. It gets to the peripheral group, which are the lurkers, which in the past we may have thought as lurkers as being kind of a negative, but with the way the websites are now, it's often very important. People keep in contact and keep in touch with information, but they may not be able to participate. They may be too busy to participate, but they will still want to connect and be involved with the shared cultural or shared body of knowledge and practices, and still want to feel part of the community. And so, but they're still part of this community of practice, where the outsiders are not necessarily connected. They may be partially connected if they're supporting or sponsoring, but people can choose what level of participation to be involved in the community of practice. And one of the key insights that I discovered from reading about this was the idea that if these levels are kept very rigid or static, it can be a problem. Things might fossilize. the people on the outlying group may feel excluded from the group. And so what's important is to allow for more dynamic, permeable layers, which is healthy. New people come in as they have more time or become more interested in what's going on, and they can share new ideas to stimulate the community of practice. And people who get busy may pull back for a while, but that constant back and forth creates a healthy community of practice. And so we shouldn't get angry or mad at people who choose to be on the outlying edge. We don't know what's going on, but we should allow for them to become more involved as they wish, and we shouldn't exclude people. And we also need to be aware that people have a choice, and the fact that they are still trying to connect with us or connect with the community of practice is important to be aware of. And so taking all those things together, I was trying to connect it with my own teaching practice. And so some of the things that I realized that both as teachers and learners, in order to be able to communicate our ideas effectively, we need to develop skills in order to express our ideas and opinions between different groups of people. We need to be able to bridge that misunderstanding between people and between our intention and what is understood. By understanding that some of the people we're working with might be diverse individuals. We need to practice working with different groups of people, not always the same people all the time, because we're comfortable with that. We need to challenge ourselves to develop these skills. We need to challenge our learners to develop these skills in order to give us and our learners the opportunities, the skills in order to vary their level of participation. If they're really interested in becoming more involved, they need the skills to show their interest and to become more involved that way. We also, as teachers and learners, we need to keep in mind that these skills that we're learning may not happen right away, not only in the short term, but the skills themselves can help us and our students in the long term, in their future careers, in other classes, connecting with people and being able to participate in communities, the communities of practice. So they may not have the skills right away, but taking time to develop them. We need to help them learn these skills. But we also need to develop an awareness that there's different ways of looking at things, back from that diamond looking shape, the idea of different perspectives within a cultural group, being aware that one perspective is not the only one, that there's not only one way to do something. We should be open to other possibilities and help our students learn that there's more than one way. We need to develop the awareness that we have strategies within ourselves, and our students have strategies to adjust to the different communities to which they already belong, but they need to add to the repertoire for groups that are more different than what they're familiar with. That we need to remember that we have a choice in our level of participation within a community of practice, and it takes time to develop skills. We need to be aware that it doesn't happen right away. So these were kind of reminders for me that I thought, well, my overall recommendation that for myself and that I would share with everybody else is maybe not any particularly new activities, but I wanted to look back at my teaching practice right now to make it more informed by incorporating these three characteristics of community, shared domain of interest, and shared practice. And so how does that become the informed practice? Well, some of the examples I thought of for my informed practice was reminding students about the ultimate goal is trying to understand each other, make their message clear to other people, to not assume people will make the same connections. It's important to not only continue doing my get to know you activities at the beginning of classes or the beginning of a course, but to also incorporate trust building activities, because it takes time to develop that trust and wanting to share things with each other. I was reminded of the importance of setting goals and reflecting on them and developing these activities both for myself, but also helping my students learn to have set a goal to work towards, and then how am I doing? So I've been teaching them how to do that and be more informed of how I create these things. You can see my informed practice on the left, I have support groups, and the right, I have rotating groups. So I thought of 2 different types of groups to practice. So I wanted students to take turns in different class activities, maybe working with different groups, so they get used to working with different people. But at the same time, I wanted them to have smaller sort of support groups that they can help and support each other, both inside and outside of the class, to help them create friendships, but also know that this is somebody that they can go to if they're having problems. I'm jumping around, continuing from rotating groups, connecting learning beyond the classroom is kind of connected with the goal setting and reflecting activities, helping students and reminding students that what they're learning in the class, they're not learning just to get a good grade, but I'm reminding them of how this particular skill or this particular activity can connect to their future goals, how it can connect to skills that they can apply in other classes that they're doing. I like to have warm-ups at the beginning of class, but I discovered that, having set routines is also a way to build their trust and get to know each other. Some of the things that I do is practice their discussion or chatting skills. It's a little bit less intense. They can relax a little bit. They learn the routine, but they're also getting to know each other. I sometimes have particular activities where I have them sharing some news, or they read a newspaper article and they share what they learned, and the others give feedback as to how much they understand. I have them checking homework right now, especially because online classes, I have them doing homework. They check in the group, they help each other explain if something's not clear. And I've also added in check-ins, occasionally checking in how they're doing because they're online. And one of the incidental benefits I've discovered, the students, at first they were hesitant to do those, what I call check-ins, but in the end, they seem to really appreciate it. And I hear them talking about that other classes, they don't get to talk to each other. And so I've been discovering incidentally that I'm getting a majority of students attending my classes. In the past, where I would have frequent absences, suddenly they're all coming and participating and wanting to interact with each other. I think some of them are feeling isolated. So overall, these support groups also, if they're making connections outside. So I think my time is almost up. So thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Val, right on time.
Okay. I was watching carefully.
All right, perfect. Okay, so let's see if there are any questions or comments.
Oh, I guess it means I had a perfect presentation. There's no questions. Okay.
I guess so. Okay, Val, I have one question.
Okay.
So you gave some examples at the end of how to introduce or how communities of practice apply to our classroom practice. But I wonder, how do you include the intercultural aspect, the intercultural communication within the community of practice you are trying to build in your classroom? Maybe you can give us a simple example of that.
Okay, I have to think. Well, in one way, I have a bit of an advantage because I actually have international students within my class. But I also remind students, because many of my students come from different parts of Japan. And so sometimes I give kind of guided questions to help them discover that maybe what they do within their family is not the same in every family. So I take it down, not just national culture, but regions they belong to. I remind them maybe what they did in high school is a little bit different than the practice that they do in university. And so I sort of point out these things, and not to point out the difference, but to make them aware that they have experienced different groups. I might ask them, you know, you're saying this to me as the teacher, would you say the same thing to your best friend? Do you say the same thing to a Japanese teacher, for example?
Yeah, I've done something similar in my classes too. And I found out that the students can be quite surprised when they realize that, oh, your family, you're doing things differently in your family. Oh, maybe it's because of where I am from. And, you know, the discussion goes on and on about that. I think we have a question in the chat. Wonderful, Val, how can you connect IC and COP in a single study?
Well, I think intercultural communication now, it's probably people are not aware of the connections, but, you know, reminding people that even within the same national group, they have different communities that they belong to. And so not just keeping it the intercultural communication at the national level, but they can build on the skills for interpersonal, but the fact that even maybe somebody from, say, the JALT environment or teaching environment trying to communicate our experience to somebody who's, say, teaching economics in Japanese, the practice is a little bit different. The way we do things is different. So that's another way you could get the intercultural group, because the language teaching group, and it might have different experiences and practices than a content teacher in the majority language. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
I hope it did.
I hope it did. Okay. Oh, you're welcome.
Right. Perfect.
Saw that message. Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments? No, everybody's shy.
Oh, okay.
All right, we have another one, Val, in the chat.
Okay.
Excellent presentation. As each learner is a microculture, do you think these microcultures find common spaces in COP without any transitions?
Okay. I think my understanding of that question is each learner is their own culture of a sort. And I think groups of people can come together and find commonality. And the idea is, you know, through coming together and sharing interest over time, you can develop the community, you can develop a shared practice. So I don't know, without any transitions, maybe not. It takes time. It's a progressive. It doesn't happen immediately, is how I've interpreted the community of practice idea. So I hope that was clear and answered the question.
Yeah, I think it makes
Okay,
sense.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
That was excellent response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we have a comment, I think, from Gabi. Thank you for the presentation. I'm thinking that communities of practice and IC is easily combined in a long-term study abroad setting.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Yeah, I think it very easily could. I think the idea of community of practice is just help to strengthen the intercultural competence development, rather than just having incidental communities, but having more involvement in developing, could really, I think, have a big impact on learners' ability to, or learners' development of their intercultural competence.
No worries.
Okay, no problem. We understand.
Apologies about the typos. No
Okay.
worries. Okay. I think we have time maybe for one more question, if there are any. No. All right then. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you, Val. That was wonderful. I hope everybody can unmute for a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And okay, now don't forget to mute your mics back.
And I need to mute mine.
Yes.
Okay.
And let's welcome Eric Hagley, who is going to talk and probably give a more specific example of communities of practice and intercultural communication.
Thank you very much, Roxana.
You are welcome.
Yes, welcome everyone. Actually, surprisingly, I am coming to you from Australia at the moment. I am in Australia. We are fortunate here having 0 COVID cases. Communities obviously are affected by the pandemic in big ways. And I'm feeling for everyone over there in Japan and other places that where the numbers are going up. But we won't focus on that for today. We'll focus on communities of practice and intercultural learning. So that's what I would like to cover today and show you a couple of examples of that taking place. I will share my screen now and jump over here. I am presuming that you can all see my screen. Good, I'm getting nods, that's great. We are looking at intercultural study, intercultural learning, intercultural understanding. There are so many different words that follow intercultural that it's becoming quite certainly a very big buzzword. In this presentation that I'm doing, I'd like to cover it from the aspect of communities of practice and show you a couple that are being carried out right now. We'll go live onto the site and have a look around. We'll have a bit of a look at the different communities they're in, because it really is important that the different communities that are participating, when they're interacting well, things really work. When they're not interacting so well, obviously problems arise. We'll cover very briefly some of the outcomes. We don't have time to cover all of the research that's been going on into this project. It's an enormous project, but at the end of it, there will be a invitation for anyone who wishes to join in the future to do so. So let's get going. Communities of practice. Well, I was very fortunate to follow Val because she did all the groundwork for me. I don't need to do any of the research, etc., based on this because she covered it so incredibly well. A name that did pop up quite often throughout her presentation, though, was Wengo. And one of the ways that the definition provided there was groups of people who share a passion for something that they know how to do and who interact regularly to learn how to do it better. And that's kind of difficult to do, really. It sounds pretty easy, but particularly when you're talking about intercultural study, it's not that easy to do, particularly in a country also like Japan, which, although it has become a lot more multicultural over the last 20 years, still has a fair feeling of, wari ni honjin. Yeah, we are a person, a group of people that are very unique, and they have that very strong feeling, which is great. But getting those people to interact with others from other countries, particularly in the past, but even today, is not an easy thing to do. What I have found is that this thing called virtual exchange helps immensely. Well, virtual exchange in a nutshell is basically just online intercultural exchange. You link your students using the power of the internet and get interaction happening. Obviously, you have to make those communities and then get that the various actions that Val introduced happening. Val mentioned often that it takes time. Now, we teachers in Japan often only, particularly university teachers, often only have 15 weeks. The fortunate ones might have their students for a year or 2 years. But I would posit that probably most English teachers will have their students for 1 semester, maybe 2. So having the time to really ensure that these communities of practice develop and all the positives that come out of them can take place, it's difficult. You have to put the fast forward button on pretty early in the piece. And virtual exchange, I think, also helps us do that. It brings classes together. Yeah, students then can interact with each other. And we're talking here students from different countries. Yeah, that's the whole idea of virtual exchange. It's international. And the students who are participating in our classes, okay, some of them perhaps aren't as passionate about learning English and learning other cultures as others, but still, if you show them to the water, hopefully they will drink. It's not always the case, but if we can present them with a platform where students can regularly interact with students from other countries, that's a big step forward. Val and Roxana were talking a little bit about how fortunate they were in that they had international students at their universities. Again, that's obviously a big plus, but it's still limited. And many universities in Japan, their access to foreign students is very limited. So there's many pluses to the virtual exchange concept. So that's why we want to incorporate virtual exchange into our classes. We want to build communities of practice, but that include intercultural development, intercultural understanding. And virtual exchange is a very useful way to do that. We've shown quite clearly that in virtual exchange, the International Virtual Exchange Project, that is, improves the cultural understanding of the participants. And this is a really important point. When we say culture, Val again gave a wonderful explanation of the 5 different aspects of it. But, and she gave a few examples of, okay, some individuals, they participate in their culture here, and when they move to a different part, it's a different culture, the family culture, the school culture. Lots of different cultures are in the everyday life. You have your own culture, and you have many of your own cultures. But when we talk about intercultural understanding, often the case is we're talking at a national level, not always, but in the International Virtual Exchange Project, we are talking at the international level. And the understanding of a Japanese student, their own Japan-based culture is unique to them. But we would encourage them to also start to think about and try to understand other countries' cultures, and that's what happens. And through the understanding of other cultures, the understanding of your own culture also develops. And that is another thing that we've shown through a number of different research projects. The place that this all starts is development of intercultural sensitivity. Now, the International Virtual Exchange Project, a lot of people around the world now are talking about competencies. And one of the big buzzwords is, okay, intercultural competency. The chances of a student participating in a short online intercultural activity, that student will all of a sudden become interculturally competent, is quite low. I would say almost no chance. To truly be interculturally competent is a mammoth undertaking, and it's not easy. But when we talk with our students and get our students interacting with students from other countries, what we're doing is showing them in a very gentle way that they can develop intercultural sensitivity. And that is an enormous and very, very important first step to achieving intercultural competency. And that's what we see being developed through the International Virtual Exchange Project. Interactional confidence also develops. Students, a very common comment that we are getting from students is, I didn't know that I could use English to interact with students in other countries. I'm feeling a lot more confident about my English usage now. That's just one part of the interactional confidence. There are others. Feeling confident enough to discuss your own culture. Lots of other aspects come into this. So yeah, students who are studying English use it. It's all the output hypotheses, Swain, all that type of thing there comes into play. So language and cultural learning becomes more engaging, authentic, and because of that, linguistic improvement can also occur, and generally does so at a faster rate than in a standard class. You're also getting more input, and the input that you're receiving is from students whose language is not a native language, whose English is not native, and so there's negotiation of meaning, and there's a lot of toing and throwing that will be a part of their English communication in the future. Everyone, I'm presuming, knows that there are way more students in the world today studying English than there is the population of native English speakers. Our students in the future will more than likely be using English to interact with non-native speakers, getting them into that understanding very early on, and understanding that they will be interacting with people who speak English but non-native speakers. They will have to negotiate the meaning. Often communication breakdown may occur, but being able to repair that is a very important thing that we as teachers should also be working towards giving our students an understanding of. Now, in 2018, Keidanren, which is the biggest group of companies in Japan that employs hundreds of thousands students coming out of universities. Each year they give a list of things that they kind of would like universities to ensure that the students who are graduating from the universities have. And in 2018, for the first time, on their list of desirable traits, intercultural understanding and competence was higher than English language ability. That is saying something really huge about the way the world is going at the moment. So these are all very, very important reasons why we should be trying to incorporate intercultural learning into our classes. And the best way to do that is through virtual exchange. Now, virtual exchange has quite a long history. You look at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the professor there, Professor Furstenberg, worked with Supoero, started in France, developed the Cultura project, which was an amazing project and is still ongoing. Hundreds of virtual exchanges are still using this Cultura project idea. And if you have time, I would strongly suggest that you have a look at it because it's phenomenal. So this is back 1997. It was really only in 1991, 1992 that the World Wide Web came to Japan. So, 1997, the internet infrastructure was still very in its infancy, and yet these amazing projects were being developed. The World Bank funded World Links for Development was a huge project. Thousands of students from developing countries and developed countries working together to develop better understanding of each other. When we say thousands, it's not that many really. It's not that many, considering the population of the world. We need more of these projects to develop, but the ideas were there and they're still ongoing. TCAMP was a very big project in Europe, 2010. And from that, well, Erasmus obviously started before that, but TCAMP was a project that tried to develop virtual understanding, virtual mobility, and the Erasmus project has gone on from that. But all of these projects, they're wonderful projects, and I'll shortly introduce a few more to you. But what people picked up pretty quickly was that, and Barron actually looked at it even from when the telephone started coming out. What happens in non-face-to-face exchanges where technology gets involved is we do see a change in linguistic behavior and attitudinal and social behavior. So keeping that in mind as you approach any virtual exchange, that you do need to impress on your students that, okay, you're behind a screen, don't use that as an excuse for non-standard behavior. But it's not face-to-face, but as I said, intercultural sensitivity is improved, it's being developed. We see far more engaging, real interactions occurring, and I'll be showing you this shortly. Myself and Matt Cotter carried out a very large study on the International Virtual Exchange project that showed that students from around the world, not just Japan, found that the virtual exchange project made English far more engaging and interesting. Cultural acclimatization started to occur. This is a term that I use. You're not really going to understand the foreign culture perfectly, but through virtual exchange, you can get a gentle introduction and be acclimatized. You don't go straight to top of Mount Everest. You go to base camp, get acclimatized, and then work your way up. So that's what occurs. Interactional confidence, we also talked about it. So how to get involved, and what does getting involved mean? Well, Solia is possibly one of the most famous virtual exchanges, and it was developed by a non-profit group with the backing of some very big universities in Europe, America, and the Middle East. Evolve is another project developed in Europe with numerous universities throughout Europe. UniCollaboration is a great place to visit the website there. If you haven't been there and you're interested in virtual exchange, check out UniCollaboration, because it's the only one really that is that lets you as an individual to get involved. Some of these other ones, it's a university level interactions. The State University of New York, SUNY's Collaborative Online International Learning Project is a wonderful one, but again, it's university level and not cheap from what I gather. Erasmus, as I mentioned, a wonderful project out of Europe, but their interactions with Asia and other parts of the world are limited. The one I want to talk to you most about today is the International Virtual Exchange Project. Now, this is the one that I started back in 2004. I was working with students in Otaru in the north of Japan and students in Popoyan, a small city in Colombia, South America. But it's developed. It's developed in a very, very big way. We, in the past 5 years, have had some 24,000 students, 400 teachers participate from around the world. These are the countries that have participated to date. So it has become one of, if not the biggest, international virtual exchange in the world. And we've been very fortunate that, number one, the Japanese government has gotten behind us with a Kaken grant. Number two, I've been able to develop and participate in community of practice with my Kaken team to begin with, and then the teachers that are involved. Adam Jenkins, Tom Rawson, Matt Cotter, Yuka Akiyama, Harashima Hideto from all of these wonderful, wonderful people who have put in an enormous amount of effort to get this up and going and working really well. Particularly the SENA in Colombia. Perhaps none of you have heard of the SENA. It's possibly one of the biggest educational institutions in the world. Each year it educates in excess of 1 million students throughout Colombia. And we've been very fortunate to be working with them. So we're moving towards actually showing you what I've been talking about. We use Moodle as the platform, but you do not need to understand Moodle to participate in this. You do not need to have Moodle at your university to participate in this. It's just the platform that we use because it's the most commonly used learning management system in the world. It's very powerful, it's very free, and it's a great platform to use. But because we do have communities of learners involved, we don't have individuals joining. It has to be at the classroom level. Okay, we need teachers involved. And so we don't actually allow any individual students to join this particular project. Okay, so what we're going to do now is have a look at it. So what happens is that if you decide in the future to join this project, you would get in contact with me. You would send me your students' details in a file that I would share with you. Then I input your students' information into the system, and they come here to the website, https://ivproject.org, and log in. And after logging in, they see their page here. Now, because I'm going to be showing some student information, I'm going to ask Naomi if she could stop the recording now, please. My keynote here, so I'll jump through this very quickly. Benefits of virtual exchange, I think you understand them. You know, language acquisition, learner involvement, motivation, cultural knowledge, all of these things are huge benefits. And if you're interested, we've got a number of papers that have been written on exchange already. We've got more coming out that show very clearly that the exchange is a very powerful way to become interculturally sensitive, first step to intercultural competence, and also improves language acquisition. Okay, if you want to join, please send me an email, ivproject.org, no dot there, ivproject.org@gmail.com. The next exchange starts next year. It's going to be over to you for question and answer time now. But yeah, what I'll do is put this into the chat so that you will have that. Okay, stop sharing. Over here, there's the email. Okay, so
Eric, I don't think you've sent the email. I don't think you've sent the chat.
Sorry, I sent it. Yep, I'll send it again. Sorry, I just sent that just to Roxana. She already has mine. There, it's gone to everyone. Okay, so we've already got some questions in the chat. I will very quickly go through those, and then anyone else who wants to ask a question, who doesn't want to type it out, that's fine. So you're not in SA then. I'm not sure what that means, but anyway, Dr. Nabaraj Nirpane, we would love to have students from Nepal join. So if you would like to add the International Virtual Exchange to your classes, we would welcome you. We have not had any students from Nepal join us yet, but you would be very, very welcome. One thing I think I mentioned, I hope it was clear, it is free of charge to join. There is no cost. Okay. The question gives some ideas of how you integrate this into your curriculum and coursework. Look, yeah, big question, very important question, difficult to cover in 1 or 2 minutes, but let's just say that it is an integral part from the very first 10 minutes of the very first class until the final exam. All my classes, the virtual exchange was absolutely integrated into every single part of the class, homework, exam, everything. So it is very important to do that, I think, to ensure that your students get the most out of it. Okay. Oh, South Australia. Okay. South Australia, sorry. Yes, it's just started. I'm actually thinking of writing a book just on that, integrating virtual exchange into various levels, whether it's the beginner level, intermediate, or upper intermediate, advanced level. There's so many ways you can integrate virtual exchange into your class, whether it's in writing, reading, listening, speaking, obviously intercultural, the cultural side of things. Perhaps I should do a presentation on how I did it for my English communication class. As I said, it's a big part of it. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Laura. Laura is a colleague of mine from Muradan, and Ming is there too. Ming is using the International Virtual Exchange project for a dual language virtual exchange. Her students are studying Chinese, students in China are studying Japanese, and they are doing a dual language virtual exchange, which is going very well. She's put so much effort into that. I'm absolutely so happy to have helped out just a little bit with that, because she has done an amazing job there. Laura also getting her students involved, and yeah, Adam Jenkins is another. God, what would I do without him? He has been absolutely instrumental in so many aspects of the IV project. Very, very grateful for everything he's done.
Eric, thank you.
But
Thank you so much. I think that Dr. Nupan, I don't know if I'm pronouncing Nopane, I think he would like to say a few things regarding IC and communities of practice in Nepal. Do you mind if we let him share for 1 minute something about that?
Yeah.
Oh, we would love
Happy
to
for that to happen,
welcome
yes.
you. Yeah.
Shall I speak now?
Yes,
I can
please.
hear you, yes.
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you, and namaste from Nepal to you all. Actually, I'm representing one of the JALT representative from Nepal. Thank you for this wonderful time. I won't be long. Through the presentation of Eric and Val, if I pronounce their names correctly, you have inspired me to do a similar type of research in Nepali context, because you know Nepal is a multilingual, multi-ethnic, and multicultural country. There are 123 languages used as mother tongue, and 125 ethnic groups are located. That's why we university teachers have been teaching such kind of multilingual, multicultural, and ethnic classes. And our classes themselves are communities of practice for me, based on Eckhart and McGinnett Connor. I also teach second language acquisition. They have written a community of practice as an aggregate of people who come together around mutual engagement in terms of ways of doing things, ways of talking, beliefs, values, power relations, emerge in the course of mutual endeavor. That's why Nepali classrooms are themselves communities of practice, maybe in the face-to-face mode or maybe in virtual mode. This time also we are in the communities of practice. Thank you so much again, Eric and Val, for inspiring me to do similar kind of research in Nepalese context. Also, I've taken email note of Eric, iveprojectorg@gmail.com. I'll be writing to him after this session. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you once more, JALT team. Thank you, organizers.
Thank you very much. Very much, very grateful. And we hope to welcome you and your students and many students from Nepal to the International Virtual Exchange Project. We would love to have you on board.
Eric, we are running out of time. We have only 1 minute left, and Vicky had a question here. Vicky, where is your question? Are there opportunities for
increasing
you?
cultural competency in healthcare? Yeah. Look, in the past, when it was class-to-class exchanges with the International Virtual Exchange Project, what we did was organize students who were studying nursing, for example, in Colombia, to be linked up with students who were studying nursing in Japan. And that was great. What we have now is, I didn't show it in this past one, but you can use the International Virtual Exchange Project to generate a kind of side topic. So for example, we have a forum that is called the Professions Forum. And in that forum, students who are studying a particular major can interact with each other and do that. Now, if, say, for example, you had nurses and you wanted to try and connect with nurses in other countries, you'll get into that community of practice, the community of teachers, and put out a forum post and say, hey, are there any other teachers around the world who are studying, who are teaching nurses? Would you like to get involved and do some ESP? And I'm sure you'd be able to find someone there. We do have students who are studying nursing from other countries involved in the present exchange. So yeah, there are opportunities there, and go for it, yeah.
All right, Eric, thank you. I will need to, unfortunately, I will need to interrupt you and stop you here because we are already 1 minute over time. So please allow me to thank you both for today's presentations. I think everybody learned quite a bit. And for the ICLE SIG members, or for those interested in joining our SIG, I would just like to quickly announce our AGM. That's our annual general meeting, which is going to be held in about 15 minutes or so. I'm not sure is in the same channel. Someone is asking me, but you can easily check it in the schedule, or if you are one of our members, you definitely got an email from me. Just check the link in the email, and I hope to see you there. All right.
Yes, it is in the same channel.
Oh, it is in the same channel.
But different room host, so I have to stop here so
All
that
right.
I can let the next room host.
I see. So is it okay for us to be here, or should we all...
Actually, if I may, sorry, Naomi, the next room host, I believe, is actually already in this room, so you could just pass straight across.
Can I just give that person the host then?
Edo-san, yes.
Okay, good. I can do that now, but can we give a round of applause before I pass on the host
That'd be
to our
nice.
presenters? Yes, and to Roxana, thank you so much.
No, thank you all.
Thank you very much. Very grateful for all of your participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Okay, Edo-san, I will pass the host to you.
Okay, I'm in.
The only thing I would perhaps suggest is pausing or stopping the recording.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
We
Okay.
do not wish to record the AGM.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you very
Stop
much.
that.